actually met. You had visited my office at my previous job that I
Okay.
was working. Yeah. So at that point, we were considering going with Solar Labs, and so we had met regarding that. I guess you guys were also just starting out back then.
I think so. Maybe
Yeah,
2019 or
yeah,
2020.
2019 probably. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. But yeah, it's really awesome that, you've started your own company and you're doing this full time. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and I haven't met Tanay. Hi. So,
Yeah.
Hi, Siddharth.
If I can just introduce Tanay for a second. So Tanay and I have been childhood friends. We went to school together. He also runs a business in jewelry, actually, called the Diamond Chef. And he wanted to be a channel partner with the previous company that I was working, and he was involved with that. And he was always into starting something in solar, and so we joined hands together last year and started Greenvest together.
okay. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So great. So I think we'll get started here. I'll
sure.
start off with a quick intro about the series, and
Yeah,
then I'll jump over to you for your introductions. Post that, we'll go into some
sure.
questions, Q&A, we'll chat,
Yeah,
and then we'll end it with a rapid fire round of some of the questions that we do, and after that we'll call it a
okay,
day. So this will take
sure.
approximately 50 minutes to 1 hour. So that's the
Yeah,
goal here. So, okay, so let's get started. Gaurav, if you could give an introduction about the company, what your vision is, why you were founded, and then your personal introduction as well.
okay. So our company is called Greenvest Energy. We started the company last year in July. We're almost a year old now. So we have been a sales focused company, right? We want to uh, expand the market, the solar market, and for that's the reason we got into it. We have a 150 kilowatt portfolio so far under us, and we are hoping to expand that a lot more this year. And our vision basically is that we want to further the solar industry, not just through sales, but we're trying to figure out innovative ways of moving the industry forward. So we are exploring things like, online platform, and we're exploring things like how we can use blockchain technology in the industry. So we're at early stages of figuring out how we can move the industry forward using new technologies.
Okay, great. Uh, cool. And how about yourself? Like, what's been your experience so far?
Yeah.
What's your what overall have you dabbled in solar?
Right.
And obviously, like you're a young guy. We're all young guys here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
founding a company is obviously like a big deal at
Right.
any age. So, what motivated you to start it, and what was your journey that led you to start this?
Right. So I my educational background is in business and information systems. So I always wanted to start my own business at some point. And I always knew that the goal was to do that at some point, even when I was in college. And right after college, actually, I started working for a solar startup in the US called Brighter Planet. Uh, and immediately I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I worked in sales and as an assistant project manager with that company. And I just realized that there's more opportunity in India to work in the solar industry here. So I moved back. I did a job here for about a year and a half, where I did practically everything in the company. So I started with as a project engineer on site, as a project supervisor on site. Then I also handled another project as a project engineer. I did procurement, I did sales. So I got an all-round experience from there. And then after COVID, I actually had to, due to the reasons I had to quit that job and take care of some family business. And post that short break, I decided I wanted to start my own company.
So, what is the difference that you felt is between the residential solar market in India versus how it is in US? What are the three main differences you would say?
Right. So number one difference, I would say, at this stage, the residential solar market there is very saturated. Uh, right. So, for example, like I used to do door-to-door sales there, and I have seen at this stage, I have relatives and families staying there and friends staying there, and they tell me that practically every week they have someone knocking on their door to sell them solar. Right. It's not viable for everyone, so they have to turn them down at many times. But uh, it's become that saturated that practically every week they have someone knocking on their door. So that's the key difference. I think it's already way too saturated. Another difference is, there, like I was talking about, innovation in the space. There are platforms like Energy Sage, for example. That's an online platform that allows you to, search for vendors in your area. It's like an Amazon for solar vendors, right? So it lets you uh, see the differences between vendors, which one's viable for you. You can schedule a site visit with them. You can leave them a review. So that's those kind of things. There's a lot more education there in terms of people know about solar a lot more. The motivation for going solar for environmental reasons is a lot more uh, effective there. So people there want to go solar not just for the cheap electricity, but also for the environmental benefits. Even if it may not be as viable for them to do it, they still do just for that reason. So that those are three differences, I would say, between the two markets. Sorry, I'm not able to hear you. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the future of residential rooftop solar in India? Is the opportunity as large as it is in the US? And by large, I mean, is it obviously there are a lot more roofs here, a lot more people. So the
Right.
number is definitely large. But
Yeah.
can a company really get into a nice, profitable business here, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely in residential there are companies that are doing really well. I think the having a larger market in terms of sheer number of customers is a big benefit, because with scale there's a lot of things that you can optimize for, right? There's a lot of costs you can optimize. There's a lot of things in terms of operations that you can optimize once you have that kind of scale. So I think there is a lot of room for uh, there's a lot of potential here in the residential market for sure.
Okay. And which are the best states would you say exist in India for rooftop solar and residential solar? Obviously, in Gujarat, we've seen majority
Yeah,
of
right.
the growth and where the solar rooftop systems are getting installed.
Yeah,
You're in Maharashtra. I'm sure you've done a lot of research, right? So, what's your
yeah.
view of the market in total?
Uh, there's a combination of two things here. One is which states are supportive in terms of the subsidy, right? Where we've seen Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra have been uh, very good in that way. The other thing is you have to look at, in terms of viability of solar, where the electricity tariffs are the highest, right? So for example, Maharashtra is one of the highest, where we have the most expensive electricity, not just in India but in the world. One of the most expensive tariffs that we have. So solar becomes a lot more viable here, right? If your returns and your break even is better.
Okay. And which states would you say are the best? Like if you were to rank Maharashtra,
it,
Gujarat,
it's
Assam.
hard. See, Gujarat is, you cannot compare it, right? They have done a lot more. Again, the market has been quite saturated there as well. I would say Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. Maharashtra has been lacking, but I'm just putting them on the list for sake of optimism that I hope uh, that they do a lot more. And there is a lot more potential to do things here.
Got it. Um, and roughly, right, for let's take Maharashtra, what is the average cost to return, the net return of an investment on a residential single house rooftop?
So let's say if you go with a 3 kilowatt system, right? The most basic configuration that you go for, uh, the cost should be somewhere in the 1,80,000 to 2 lakh range, right? This is before subsidy. Uh, and if we consider that, and it generates, so 3 kilowatt will generate say about 1,400 units per kilowatt. That should be about 4,200 units in a year, which depending on the tariff. So if we go with an average of say 10 rupees, that's going to save you about 42,000 a year. So you can see that without a subsidy, the break even should be somewhere around 4.5 to 5 years. And of course, these are including GST and including maintenance, right? The cost that I uh, told you about. So there's that. And with the subsidy, we see, the subsidy can be about 40 to 50,000 for that plant size, and that should reduce your break even by a year, right? So, 3.5 to 4 years is with the subsidy is what we would expect the returns to be like.
And obviously, in India, mostly we are seeing the capex subsidies, right? So,
Yeah.
what is your view about feed-in tariffs and any other type of measures that further subsidize or generation-based incentives? Do you think that any of those are valid and should be coming out in our ecosystem? And why have they not come out so far?
Uh, so again, I think there's a lot of bureaucracy in our system, right? Which is why we are probably not open to different types of models, right? So for example, slightly unrelated, but in the US, another difference that was there was in terms of financing models, right? There was a lot more options. So even for residential, OPEX or power purchase agreements were very readily available there. There was also leasing options where, as a property owner, you can just lease your roof space to a solar company. So they pay you a monthly rent, right? And they install the plant, they maintain it, they take the benefit from it, and they just lease your roof space. That's all. There was also something called community solar, right? Which is, you can purchase credits. You can purchase credits of electricity that is generated from solar, and you can apply those credits to your regular electricity bill, so it becomes cheaper, right? So you buy the credits at a cheaper rate than your normal electricity tariff would be, and then you use those credits to deduct from your electricity bill. So those are kind of uh, things that we don't have here. One is, also because we don't have uh, credit history, or for a lot of clients we don't have that. But yeah, there's a that's the reason I think that we need those kind of innovations, but we don't have that as of now.
Sure. Um, Correct. I think it's something for all the industry as well as regulators to look at. Uh,
Yeah.
I've seen some pilots of generation-based incentive come in Delhi, but then it got removed. So it's come around, and regulators and policymakers have tried a few of these things, but I
Yeah.
think only the capex subsidy model has actually
Right.
stuck.
Taken off.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. And you know, one of the things I encountered this in a few states, a lot of our customers have said this, that you get the subsidy, but it's the EPC company which actually avails of it or gets it, right? So they
Right.
basically even have to install at a loss or at a very thin margin, and then
Yeah.
wait for the subsidy to come in later. And sometimes it's
Right.
delayed even a year or even 2 years
Yeah.
is in some states, and
Correct.
that actually just affects the work environment so much because the companies are under loss for some time, but they then have a accounts receivable from the government, which they don't know when it's going to come. So that
Right.
also, I think, affects the investor sentiment and how comfortable people are in just running a business. So,
Correct.
so I think that's something that people or our government has to look at very strongly and make sure that if they have a policy, it gets implemented as it's written down, right? And
Yeah.
stuff happens, payments and everything happens on time.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And like in your view, what's the economical viability um, of a residential plant from a consumer point of view? The context is, you know, like I as a consumer have so many things to buy. Like my mind is scattered, right? I can go for solar rooftop systems. I could buy a car, right? And
Yeah.
I have so
Yeah.
many myriad of expenses to do, right?
Right.
And obviously, as I'm getting electricity from the grid, rooftop is not at the top of my mind, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, it has a value proposition, but it's just not something I need.
Yeah.
It's something that's a good to have, right?
Mm.
And obviously, that is what it is. But how do you sort of market yourselves and how do you evangelize the concept so that the individual rooftop owner is able to get away from all the noise and
Yeah.
actually understand the economic value, the environmental value? So what's your pitch to them?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. When you're thinking about viability, you're thinking in terms of as opposed to what, right? The opportunity cost. What is the opportunity cost of, say, not going solar, right? So you have to put it into perspective. The good thing is that a lot of our, um, at least the younger generation, is getting a lot more financially literate, right? So financial literacy will play a huge role in this, because people realize, okay, I have to plan for the long term, and one of the easier ways or the safer ways, more reliable ways of planning to save for the long term is by going solar, right? So we that's why our company is actually called Greenvest, right? We want people to think of it as an investment rather than uh, just an electricity producing device, right? It's not just that, it is an investment. So you're going to compare it to other forms of investment. You're going to compare it whether I should take this amount of money and put it in stocks, or whether I should put it in mutual funds, or should I put it in crypto, or should I put it in solar, right? So uh, the good thing about solar is that it's a reliable asset. So what you're going, the kind of returns that you're going to get. So it's a low risk asset in that sense. People are getting more and more financially literate, so they realize that, okay, if I buy a car with this money right now, I'm going to have to I'm not gaining any money from it. That's not an asset to me, it's a liability to me. So I think educating customers about the financial aspect of it, and thinking about solar as a financial device, as much as many of us would want to be think of it as renewable energy or climate change and all of that, but it is essentially a financial device that, and we would, as of now, want people to think about it that way.
Right. So with the equity markets going into volatility, I think
Yeah.
it might now finally be a safer option for us to
Right.
park our
Yeah.
money in a solar rooftop plant versus
Right.
risking it on equities right now. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a recent pitch that you guys have started.
Right. Yeah. So, and we also want to, like I said in the beginning in our introduction, we are exploring ways to make it easier for people to sort of invest in solar. Maybe if you like the community solar option, maybe if you don't have a viable rooftop, but you have the money to invest in solar, you can do that. So we're exploring ways how we can enable that.
Mm. Okay, makes sense. Um, and in your opinion, right now, what's the next biggest trend in the short term or long term within the energy or the solar industry?
So there's multiple things. I'm sorry. I'll just give me 1 second. Yeah. Sorry, sir. The trends in the industry. One I would say is, obviously off grid is going to be taking off at some point, right? Once the economics get more viable for that. Uh, we see a lot of electricity cuts all over the country, power outages. So it just makes sense that that would be the more desirable option once it's more economically viable. It reduces the dependency on net metering or the grid. So it would definitely be that is one of the long-term trends that is bound to happen at some point. Uh, we will see probably a lot more manufacturing happening in India, right? Because of the duties and the new policies that the government is coming up with to encourage manufacturing in India, and that will be great, right? So we that is something that we need, right? As a country, being energy independent is going to be, for any country, being energy independent is going to be like a superpower to have. So being able to produce our own uh, silicon or our own solar cells is going to be a huge advantage to us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So,
And of course, I think innovation in financing models, like we discussed before. So
yeah,
that's going to be the next
yeah, I agree
trend.
with you. I think, as you said, right, bringing the RESCO model, which is the PPA model or the solar roof leasing model to India,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so much roof space available, and I think there's a lot more money in informal systems than in formal systems. So even though the credit
Right.
history and those checks, might not be there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
people definitely afford it, and they can definitely pay the EMIs. So we just
Correct.
need to figure
Yeah.
out how we can bring that informal money system
Yeah.
and
I mean,
bring
we're
that out.
seeing a lot of fintech companies do that, right? They're able to provide micro financing and loans to small customers who've never had a credit history before. So it definitely is possible to do.
It's an interesting space. I think, but those loans are. I mean, I've seen the 12% club by Bharat Pay, and there
Yeah.
are a few of these, right?
Yeah.
The concern is there. I think the ticket size of loans is a little lesser than what you might
Yeah.
require, right?
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
1 lakh limited to a lakh or something.
Right.
Uh, but I think, yeah, it's
It
still
still
something.
is viable, right? For maybe not a 5 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt system, but a 3 kilowatt system. I think
Yeah,
should be viable to do it that way. Uh, Another thought that might not it forgive me if it doesn't make sense, but your discom doesn't require a credit check to provide you electricity, right? They don't need that. uh, why does a solar uh, uh, developer require a credit check, right? So if there is some sort of tandem between the discom and solar financing companies or developers, right? We can have we can provide OPEX, or we can provide RESCO. And if, say, the customer is not paying their bills, what does the discom do? They just turn off your electricity, right? So you sort of have to pay your electricity bills, and everyone does pay their electricity bills. So
right.
uh, if that might not make sense, but if we do have some sort of tandem there, we can work something out.
Yeah. I actually remember this exact idea coming up in one of the policy discussions at DERC. Um,
Right.
I don't remember, like, there was some technical reason as to why it could not, why the regulator was of the opinion that Discom could not cut the asset unless the asset belonged to the Discom itself.
Right.
So there was some, something like that. But I think, that's like one reason, right? But
Yeah.
if there's a
I mean,
serious effect
with
there, you could
at
work
least with
around the problem.
yeah, at least with state-owned discoms, I think it should be something to be encouraged, even if it may not be viable for them. I mean, we do bail out discoms with thousands of crores every year, so why not a little more that may supercharge the solar industry? That will completely change the game. So
I even look at it as a money maker for discom. So maybe, the
right.
developer or the homeowner, they pay a fee to the discom per month,
Yeah,
as
exactly.
a maintenance for this kind of enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Uh, it's a way to monetize the service for the discom also. I mean, yeah, I mean, now we put it out. Let's see if someone takes that idea. And, uh,
Someone's watching it, the right people are watching.
yeah. Great. So, cool. So I think I want to move to the next one. So, like, how was it for your company before and after using like our software, Solar Labs?
Right.
What changes did you get to see? How did it affect your business, interaction with customers?
Okay. Yeah. So before Solar Labs, we were using Helioscope, which is a good software, but the challenges that we as a new company were facing was what we needed was smaller for residential projects, right? Smaller project sizes. We found that Labs was better in a couple of ways, which was one, it produces the 3D model, and it's a lot easier to produce the 3D model with Solar Labs. Um, it's a lot more suited to residential in the sense that you can create the parapet very easily. It's basically a click of a button. Things like that made it a lot easier to use and a lot better to present to the clients. I think that's one great aspect. And then the second thing is that it calculates the annual generation, and it presents it in a very visually easy to understand way, right? With the thermal red to green spectrum for each module, and calculating it on an annual basis is actually what's great, because coming from a large commercial project background, in those, of course, you need to have you need to make sure you're a lot more careful with shadows and the sort of things there, right? So you want to keep those areas that are under shadow, you want to keep them out of uh, you don't want to put solar modules there throughout the year, but having that annual calculation for smaller projects and for residential, I think, is extremely useful.
But a lot of the resistance that we as a company have faced in the market is
Yeah.
that people just don't have those detailed proposals, and many things just work on back of the paper calculations, right? So does a more detailed proposal help you in any way with winning the customer, or is it something that you just do for better designing?
Yeah. So I think for us, better designing is what is more important to us with respect to Solar Labs. The proposal is great, right? The only thing is that we prefer to have our own format in which we present to the customer. We do use the 3D link. So in our proposal, we put the 3D link in it, so the customer, when we send them a PDF version of it, they can just click on the link and look at the design. So that's great. But in terms of, we don't actively use the proposals that are generated from it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of a lot of the feedback that we have gotten,
Yeah,
and over the next 4 months, we will have a proposal editor inside the tool
great.
itself, so that you
Yeah,
can
that'll be great.
customize that according to. It's like Google Doc within
Yeah,
a product.
got
So
it. Yeah,
that's
that would be great. But I do really appreciate the fact that you guys think about it from the point of not just the end customer, but also from the point of the salesperson, or the design engineer, right? Having that seamless flow of producing the design, generating the quotation, and then sending it to the customer. The customer having something to look at, having the 3D design to look at. So I think the thought process is absolutely great there.
Thanks. I mean, that's our vision, basically to empower
Yeah.
POCs and
No, it is great.
awesome. Um, so now, from a proposal, right? We're talking about proposals. So, what would be your advice to a consumer of solar? If they have like 5 or 6 proposals that they need to compare, take a decision on,
Yeah.
what should their thinking process be, right? What
What
should they
should be?
ask? Yeah,
Yeah.
what should they ask the installer? Yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, how should an end customer evaluate a solar proposal, right?
Right.
So what should they ask the installer? What should they ask? Should be included in the proposal itself or any terms and conditions, things like that. So how would you advise the end customer?
Yeah. So Tanay, do you want to answer this?
No, no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. So the what I think that the customer should look at is, what are the materials that are being provided, right? And that's not easy for every customer to understand. So from the quality of the structure to the quality of what kind of fasteners are going to be used, these are really small things that the customer may not understand. But we try to educate our customers to understand how in the long term that may affect your solar plant, right? If you're not putting up an investment for 2 or 5 years, right? It's a 25-year investment that you're putting up. So make sure that what you are putting up, all the details. So we would encourage the customers to go into the detail and understand what each material is and how it would affect the longevity of the plant or the safety of the plant, right? So what's the difference between an HDGI prefabricated structure as opposed to like an MS structure that's fabricated on site? Many people do understand that, but a lot don't as well. Why do you need to have a structure that is tested for wind speed, right? Why does that matter? People do understand now that we've seen a few cyclones in the last few years. Now people are like, okay, yeah, I understand now. If there is a cyclone, we need to be prepared for that. uh, People do care about leakage, right, on their through their roof. So what kind of fasteners are being used? Is it a chemical fastener? Is it not? What kind of cables are being used? All of that, I feel going into the details is very necessary for any customer to make the right decision, not just comparing on price, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what happens. That's what
Yeah, it does happen because we are a price sensitive
market,
customer as a market, right? Yeah.
right? No, true. Um, and what would be the correct way of educating the end customer on all of these points? Is there something that for example, we can help through technology, or we can put out like knowledge into the internet, or
Right.
because as a ecosystem, like we want everyone to get educated, right?
Yeah.
In a world of more knowledge, uh,
Right.
there's less that can go wrong. So
Yeah.
what do you think like we as a company could do? What would be your advice to us, or to anyone watching here today?
Right. So I think what you guys could do is, in terms of educating the customers, content could be very helpful, right? So uh, a lot of customers that we have spoken to these days, they especially in residential, it's they say that, okay, I was looking at some YouTube video about solar, and they were explaining that this is how it works and all of that. um, there is a lot of misinformation in that too, but creating good content, I think, would be very helpful in regional languages as well, because we have so many diverse languages in this country. Creating content for YouTube, maybe blogs, Instagram and Facebook, those kind of things. I think educating the customer not just about solar, but about how to buy solar, what they should be comparing. And so, for example, in the US, Energy Sage does this really well. So that's the platform I spoke about earlier. They
Mm.
have and they have excellent blogs where they explain how do you compare solar modules. So, how what is the difference between poly and mono, right? They explain that in a very accessible way where the average person is able to understand it, and they explain how you should compare solar vendors, or how you should compare what system is right for you, whether on grid or off grid is right for you, what is net metering, those kind of things. Customer education with through content, I think, would be great. And
Sure.
thinking about it as a financial device, like we discussed, changing that thought process.
Right. Absolutely. Um, Understood. So now, in the future, right? Let's say that there'll be an X percentage of energy which will be solar.
Yeah,
X percentage will be wind. Some might be nuclear. We'll have some lower percentage coal, oil, and we'll have like a very diverse energy mix, out of which
right.
solar will still be the or at least we in the industry believe that solar is going to be one of the major components
Yeah,
of that.
yeah,
Now, this can be further broken down into both rooftop and the utility scale
you,
ground mount plants,
yeah.
right? So, why is solar still a viable option? Why is rooftop solar still a viable option, in your opinion, as compared to the utility plants where so much economies of scale can be enjoyed?
Yeah. I mean, see, utility scale solar. I mean, we are going to live in a future where both exist, right? So it isn't going to be just one or the other. Utility scale solar has its place, of course. It is. We are going to be moving towards that, and nuclear and whatever hydroelectric, the mix of the supply side of the for the discoms. But at the same time, there is an advantage. So like I said, energy independence is going to be very important for at the national level. I think even at an individual level, energy independence is going to be very important, right? So if you have your own off-grid system where you're producing and consuming your own electricity, is going to have a lot. It is going to be a lot bigger advantage as an individual as well, because then you're not dependent on you know power outages, or you're not handicapped by basically power outages. You're not dependent on a huge grid infrastructure. We're going to see an increase in consumption of electricity in the next 5 to 10 years because of EVs, right? We're going to see a major, I think, the I might be wrong about the numbers, but it's somewhere about 20 to 30% increase, right? We likely in many parts of the country don't have the infrastructure to be able to handle that sort of increase. So it is going to be a mix of rooftop and utility scale solar. It's probably never going to be, uh, you know, one or the other.
Yeah,
I also, sorry, I also like to think of solar as decentralized energy. So like this is a term that I feel is most applicable because it's the only form of energy production that's decentralized, right? And we know from a lot of the trends in the recent past the technology industry and the IT industry as well. We know we are moving towards decentralization in terms of everything. So I think decentralized energy is going to be uh, another major thing, right? What would be the point of having decentralized systems like Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies when you're powered by a centralized grid, right? You need decentralization there too.
Yeah, absolutely. The decentralization is coming. I think that's
Yeah,
one of the larger themes, and
yeah,
with it, solar will also come.
right.
Right. Uh, Absolutely understood. And talking about decentralization, how about microgrids? Why?
Yeah,
Why?
so yeah, exactly. So that's going to be another one of the major trends. Of course, that also requires financial viability. So I do think that is in our long-term future we are going to have microgrids, especially in areas that haven't been electrified so far. Microgrids combined with innovation and financing for microgrids are that's going to change the game for a lot of these areas, rural areas that haven't been electrified so far. But yeah, even within certain smaller towns or so, we can see microgrids being advantages where you're able to trade electricity with one another when there's a shortfall or an excess. You're able to trade it with your uh, neighbors or people in your particular town, and those transactions could be happening on the blockchain. So there's a lot of potential uh, for innovation there. But yeah, I do think in the long term we are going to see more and more microgrids happening. It's going to take some time for it to be viable, but it will happen.
Got it. So you're saying microgrids will happen like, we'll have a city. In the city there, let's say that there's one colony, and we have a regular electricity supply going in there.
Yeah,
Plus we have a microgrid running, so that maybe at lower cost, or when there's more energy provided by the sun, at that
right.
time everyone is running on solar. But and if there's a
Yeah,
shortfall in what solar is, then we plug into the grid. And so both of the systems would probably need a standard of how they would connect and talk to
yeah,
each other. I think
yeah.
that standard does
So
not exist.
of course our current grid would probably not be viable for that, right? There are a lot of smart grid initiatives across the country where so it would require an upgrade in infrastructure as well. But as a standalone microgrid for a particular rural area that hasn't been electrified so far,
Hmm,
and for those, I think we're going to start with that, and then for other areas, it's probably going to be subject to you have to do a cost benefit analysis of whether it makes sense to do or not. Is the energy independence worth it, or is it viable for us?
sure. Makes sense. Okay. So I think that's all the questions that I had. Let's move over to the rapid fire round. So in this section, we have four questions, and you have to just give a shoot back a reply. We'll move over to the next one, right? So
Okay.
few words at maximum.
Okay.
Okay. So starting off, who's your favorite entrepreneur?
I mean, hands down, Elon Musk. There's no. I mean, it's a cliched answer, but like hands down, there's no comparison to him. But I also love from the Indian entrepreneurs I recently saw Shark Tank. So I love Piyush Bansal. I think he's great. Just because I feel he's not just motivated by money, which is also Elon. I don't think he's motivated just by money, but has a larger vision. So I think that, and Jack Dorsey from Twitter also. I think he's great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What's your favorite entrepreneurship slash management book?
Entrepreneurship book. So I've just started reading Atomic Habits. So that's a great book. I feel because every entrepreneur needs to be able to discipline themselves in order to create something, right? So there's that. Um yeah, I think
Okay.
that would be a
What's
great
your
topic.
what's the company you admire the most?
Sorry,
What's the company that you or company or startup that you admire the most?
a company or a startup that I admire the most. And that's a tough question. There's a lot of companies, but again, I would say I think Tesla is doing great in terms of innovation, right? I think they are really leading the chart on that. I think, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a great.
Yeah. And finally, what's your favorite or what's the management principle that you feel is the most important while running your company?
So I think hiring the right people, and by hiring the right people, what I mean is, if some if someone takes ownership of their work, you cannot go wrong with hiring them, right? Skill doesn't matter as much, or talent doesn't matter as much as uh, a person taking ownership of their work. So I personally, from my previous work experience and from my current businesses that I'm running, I don't think I have ever gone wrong with hiring someone that takes ownership. And you can easily tell if someone takes ownership by if they have previously, worked on their own project and then failed at it, or something like that. You can tell that this person is going to take ownership of their work. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely agree. In fact, in our last masterclass with Dr. Rashid, he had mentioned listen to your customers and understand your customers, right? So that was his management principle, and I think that's basically what it's about, right? Having the right team in place, understanding
Right.
the customer problems, and
Yeah.
if you do a couple of those things right, I think you'll be able to have a good solution and then take it to the market effectively in an efficient way, right? And then
Right.
it just sort of the business sort of just cycles on.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. So I think that's it from us today in our episode 2 of the masterclass. Thanks, Gaurav. Thanks, Tanay, for attending, and
Thank
it was wonderful having you.
thank you so much.
The recording has stopped.